In case you were not here on our first call, I'm not going to go back through and do the whole intro. We're just going to let you go listen to that first call also, which I think is an incredible call. And I'm saying that for anybody listening to this recording as well. But what we're going to do is we're just going to jump right into some questions. And then what we'll do is after we go through the questions that were upvoted, we can actually invite you guys to raise your hand and ask a specific question if there's time after we get there. But Gary, my first question for you today is kind of a softball perhaps, and that is just, how are you, man, in this moment? How's your heart? How's your energy? How are you feeling? Anything we can celebrate with you?
Oh, it's amazing. You know, I wake up every day and pretty much do the same thing. I mean, I said it last time. I truly feel like I found something that I would otherwise do for free and somehow monetized it. So, you know, doing things like this doesn't feel like work to me. You know, it's a pleasure because I truly feel like the information doesn't belong to me. It just sort of flows through me. And so when I get the chance to like let that information go, I mean, I get high from this stuff. I tell people all the time, like, this is my drug of choice. This and a cold plunge. You know, I get so much benefit out of people that are receptive. You know, when people value the information and you can give somebody tangible things that actually make a material change in their life, it's the most rewarding thing in the world. You know, it's just like shaping a child, but just doing it as an adult. So I'm very gracious. I'm full of gratitude that you guys even invited me back on. It says that you must have gotten some value from the first talk. So, you know, if we can spend some time really adding value to your members, I mean, that's chicken soup for the soul for me, man.
Oh, good. It's a perfect transition. Let's just jump right into the questions. My heart wants to go ask you a bunch of other questions about you and learning styles and things that, you know, would just give guys a peek into your world. But I also think that just getting to these questions, we can do all of that through these questions. So let me get to the first one. This got voted up to the top. 2 of our members have family members of theirs, one wife and one child, who have chronic myeloid leukemia.
Oh, okay.
They're wanting to know if you have any specific counsel for them, advice, anything that would support their healing.
Yeah, so chronic myeloid leukemia, which is essentially a form of blood cancer, you know, it has several origins. The most common is a chromosomal translocation. It's actually a swap of chromosomes 9 and I think 22. So from a genetic origin, there's not a lot you can do about the genetic origin of this disease, but there's a lot that you can do about the progression, right? One of the main things is to focus on the clarity of the immune system. Because remember, the immune system doesn't just police us against pathogens and viruses and, you know, and bacteria and parasites. About 60% of the immune system's role is to police the body itself. 60% of the time, the immune system is actually eating our own cells. They're called senescent cells, right? One of the big benefits of fasting, right, is that we go into an area of increased immune response to senescent cells. Senescent cells are essentially cells in the human body that are still alive, but they have lost their capacity to perform their function, right? So long before a red blood cell dies, it loses its capacity to carry oxygen. Long before a white blood cell dies, it loses its capacity to mount an immune response. Long before a platelet dies, it loses its capacity to transport growth factors. Well, this is just like having a company full of lazy employees, right, that are still on the payroll. You'd rather get their butts out of the seat and replace them with someone that will do their job. And this will both reduce the severity of the symptomology, the pain, especially lower left flank pain. The only real known cure for this, and it is becoming increasingly more safe, is a bone marrow transplant, which used to be a very, very risky procedure. But now these mesenchymal stem cell derived bone marrow embedded transplants have put patients into permanent remission. But between now and a decision like that, most patients are on something called a tyrosine kinase. Interested if they're on a a TKI inhibitor. If not, that's certainly something they should look into. It's called tyrosine kinase inhibitors. And then the second is there are some very innocuous peptides. These are peptides that any doc can prescribe. 10x Health can prescribe these for you. One is called thymosin alpha. It's a daily injectable peptide. And what it does, a lot of guys take it. Many of you guys have probably heard of it. Thymosin alpha or thymulin. These are daily injectable 10 cc subfluid in a peptide, thymosin alpha. Yep. And also thymulin. And what this peptide does is it enhances specifically the acuity of the immune system. Right. Healthy people can take it and it bolsters their immune system. Myeloid leukemia patients can take this because they have weakened immune systems. And the second one is a very innocuous healing peptide called BPC 157, body protection compound 157. It's an anti-inflammatory compound. It has no known side effects. It's synthesized from gastric juice. It's technically a pentadecapeptide, a gastric pentadecapeptide. It's inside the body of everybody listening to this phone call right now. In myeloid leukemia patients, there is a significant reduction in the body's capacity to heal from assault. And so BPC 157 is one of the few peptides that has shown high levels of efficacy, and thymosin alpha. There's an amazing PhD on the West Coast, meaning Dr. Rafael Gonzalez, who's a very good friend of mine, who's been involved in research in these bone marrow transplant patients. There are very few true genetic diseases. Unfortunately, chronic myeloid leukemia does have a genetic origin with this translocation of the chromosomes. And so to actually get back to a baseline, usually the bone marrow transplant is what puts it in permanent remission.
Gary, thank you for that. Can you also speak a little bit more to the peptides themselves from a standpoint of how big are you on these? Where do you get them? How might somebody continue to research them? Because these have been recommended to me, and I'm sure the other guys, I've seen the conversations happening in our health threads. Yeah.
So peptides really are the wave of the future. The reason why they're not so popular is because they're all off patent. Nobody owns the patented rights to a peptide. It's an amino acid sequence, right? So they're usually 22 to 44 chain amino acids. The body recognizes these. They're metabolites, meaning the body breaks them down and can get rid of them. They don't turn into exhaustive waste. They don't create side effects in almost all cases. So what a peptide does, it's an amino acid sequence, and depending on the sequence of amino acids, it's designed to perform a specific function. One of the hallmarks of aging, we realize, is that our organ systems actually don't lose the capacity to secrete youthful levels of hormones and other secretions. For example, the pituitary does not lose the capacity to secrete youthful level of growth hormone. The testicles don't lose the capacity to secrete youthful levels of testosterone. What happens as we age very often is not a dysfunction in the production, it's a decrease in the signal. And this is an important distinction, right? It's like when you walk into a room and you're listening to music and you can't really hear the music, you don't go over and mess with the speaker, because the speaker doesn't determine how loud it plays. The tuner does, right? So if you progressively turn the volume down, you'll see a progressive drop in the volume of the music. And this is true in systemic organ systems in human beings. So for example, if we want to rewind our pituitary to a more youthful level of growth hormone secretion, rather than take human growth hormone from outside the body and put it in, which is very dangerous, then what we can do is we can use a peptide to increase the signal to it's called a secretagogue, but to increase the signal to the pituitary to turn up its production of growth hormone. Now, the thing about growth hormone peptides, just to isolate those for a second, is you have to use them in unison, right? There's something called a growth hormone releasing hormone, like Somorelin, CGC 1295, Ipamorelin, MK677, Tesamorelin, and there's something else called a growth hormone releasing peptide, like Ipamorelin. The reason why we want to use both of these at the same time, either orally in a sublingual to go under the tongue, or in an injectable form. My preference is actually sublinguals. Believe it or not, the thinnest skin in your body is on the floor of your mouth. Peptides are very small molecules. You can put them under the tongue and they can go right into the bloodstream. The reason why we want to use both of these is because anytime we replace function in a human body, we want to obey the command hierarchy in the body, right? So growth hormone, for example, is released by the brain, telling the hypothalamus to tell the pituitary to secrete growth hormone. The brain is the captain, the hypothalamus is the first mate, the pituitary is the second mate. When you take growth hormone from outside the body and put it in, you actually reverse that process. You upstream regulate, right? So you have the second mate telling the captain what to do. And in the human body, that's not what you want, right? So combining a Sermorelin and an Ipamorelin, CJC 1295, and Ipamorelin, or Tesamorelin and Ipamorelin, those are the safest ways to get long-term systemic effects for raising growth hormone. But then we have peptides that target other structures, right? We have peptides that lengthen telomeres. There's one called epitalon. It's now fastly becoming the most human research peptide in the world. It is a telomerase peptide. It's been clinically proven to increase the length of telomeres. That's sort of the cap that's on the end of the chromosome. We know now that telomere length is directly related to biological age. So you can kind of think of a telomere as a little plastic cap on the top of a shoelace. So as if you were to start progressively decreasing that, eventually the shoelace would fray. That's what happens to, yes, epitalon, somebody put it in the chat. There are peptides that are anti-anxiolytics, anti-anxiety peptides. There's a phenomenal peptide called Selenk. It's in a nasal spray. Again, virtually no known side effects, solid human clinical trials. By the way, the growth hormone peptides, Sermorelin, was first approved by the FDA in 1993. We have 30-year tachyphylactic studies on these. Tachyphylaxis is the medical term for desensitization. So we have 30-year desensitization studies on these, proving that the body does not desensitize to this peptide for 30 years. We don't have 30-year studies on anything in modern medicine, right? Peptides as a category is extraordinarily safe. BPC 157, which stands for Body Protection Compound 157, probably my favorite peptide. I think everybody over the age of 45 should be on that peptide. No known toxicity dose. It's tolerated very well orally. It increases the rate of healing, decreases inflammation, repairs neuronal tissue. You find it all throughout the lining of the gut. Anytime that I have somebody that's had leaky gut or gut issues or prolonged use of antibiotics, or Crohn's disease, or diverticulitis, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, any of those conditions that affect the gut, we always put them on BPC 157. So in a nutshell, they're safe, they're amino acids, they're metabolites, the body recognizes them, and they're generally encouraging the body to perform a more youthful function of something that it already does.
And lastly, Gary, if somebody wants to get them, where would they go to do that?
If you don't have a physician, you can come to 10X Health. Our doctors, I train our whole entire clinical team on peptide therapy. So I have an entire library of all of the published peer-reviewed on peptides. I've committed, almost all of that to memory. So I do peptide lectures for our clinical team, and then they prescribe them to our patients. So if you want to get really good peptide counsel, you can get your blood labs done with us, get a gene test done with us, and we're happy to get you on peptide therapy. We've actually seen miracles with peptides. It's astounding. Would
you run them for a certain length of time in an individual, like, hey, do this for 3 to 6 months and then you should be good to go? Or is this an indefinite injection or, oral supplement?
So each of these peptides has kind of a different protocol. So for example, epitalon, the one that lengthens telomeres, usually you would do a full ml injection of that peptide once a day for 10 days, and then you take a 6-month break. With growth hormone peptides, there is what's called an anti-tachyphylactic protocol for desensitization. So 6 months on, and then meaning you can use it 7 days a week for 3 to 6 months. And after that, you go to 5 days on and 2 off. So Monday to Friday, weekends off. And you don't get this desensitization. The BPC 157 peptide is the only one that we would put patients on indefinitely, especially as an oral peptide. As an injectable peptide, you can use it for all kinds of what we call nips and bibbles around the body: knees, hips, shoulders, rotator cuff, bicep tendons, ankles. And you can, as a patient, you can actually spot inject yourself. It's very safe. So for example, I had a mildly torn, not a completely torn bicep tendon, just from overdoing it in the gym, like a repetitive use injury. And for a week, I put 0.5 ml of BPC 157 peptide right into the shoulder, right above that bicep tendon. And it healed like a Wolverine. A lot of what these peptides do is harness the body's own capacity to heal itself. If you've ever heard of platelet-rich plasma, PRP, this is where you just take your own platelets out, you spin your own blood down, you take your own platelets and inject them back into the site of injury. Remember, a platelet itself is kind of useless, but what a platelet has inside of it is called growth factors. That's all the healing power of the human body. So if you can concentrate growth factors at the site of an injury, you're just basically bringing all of the body's power to heal itself to bear right at that site of injury. This is how BPC 157 works. What BPC 157 does, amplifies the signal into the bloodstream that a tendon, a ligament, a bone, or some site in the body is injured. And when that happens, the body hears that signal and sends platelets there, essentially to burst and drop off growth factors. So one of the incredible things about peptides is the normal mechanism by which they work is to increase the secretion of a normal, organs output in the body. That's why I'm such a big fan of those. Other peptides like Selenk you would use as needed if you have, anxiety, you find yourself in anxious situations, you're a nervous flyer, you're nervous in crowds, you're nervous if you public speak, sometimes Selenk peptides are just used as needed for things like that. So if you came to us, we would obviously put you on the right protocol for the right peptide.
Excellent. All right, moving on to another question, taking a turn here to the baseline of this question is healing from COVID, dealing with neurological issues and mast cell allergies. So this member is on a low histamine diet. They've got an extensive supplement regimen and recovering from lost strength and nerve issues. Any guidance for that particular person?
Yes. I'm going to send this to you right now. This is an absolute must-have. I'm going to put this into the chat. So what's happening here with long COVID, first of all, I would do a number of things. If you're is that person on the line with us?
I don't think so. I just saw a note about that. Tell me, Sarah, if he is.
Okay. Because I'd love to ask him some questions.
No, I don't see him on.
Okay. So usually people with long COVID, which is not COVID at all, but what we call long COVID, because it's symptoms that of COVID after COVID that progress for a long period of time. There's 3 commonalities here. Number one, the most common is secondary viral infections, right? So what happens when the immune system gets run down is the viruses that you already have raise their ugly head. They're very opportunistic. Remember, if you had mono in 8th grade, it comes back as Epstein-Barr. You can be 55 years old and have a recurrence of mono. It's just called Epstein-Barr. You didn't catch Epstein-Barr, you've always had it. Same way that chickenpox, which goes dormant after you had chickenpox as a child, comes back as the shingles. So there's all kinds of viruses that do this. Remember that only 60% of your DNA, this blows people's minds, but it's an absolute fact. Only 60% of your DNA is human DNA. 40% of every strand of DNA in your body is viral. And so what happens is every time your DNA unwinds and rewinds and unzips and rezips, right? This double helix, your body silences these viruses. Those viruses are exposed and silenced and exposed and silenced. As the immune system gets run down, what happens is these viruses reemerge. So you get an Epstein-Barr virus infection, you get a cytomegalovirus infection, you get an influenza infection, and these are low-grade infections that cause crushing fatigue, soreness, brain fog like you can't even imagine. This is a massive issue in double-boosted patients. I have not seen a single patient, not once in the last 2 years, that has had more than one COVID booster that does not have something called diffuse vasculitis, which is a systemic inflammation in the lining of the blood vessel, right? So And this is the most overlooked thing in all of modern medicine. All of their images will be normal. Their CAT scans will be normal. All their testing will be normal. They'll start taking a ton of supplements that should normally have an effect. They will have very little effect, if any, because these supplements are not able to get out of the bloodstream into the tissue, right? I mean, we like to say that the skin is the largest organ in the human body. I actually take issue with the endothelial lining of the blood vessel is the largest organ in the human body, because, you know, the skin has a surface area about half the size, about a half of a tennis court. The lining of the endothelial lining of the blood vessel has about 6 tennis courts, about 6,000 square meters. And you have 63,000 miles of blood vessel in your body. If you get inflammation in the lining of the blood vessel called the glycocalyx, then nothing exits and nothing enters. Nutrients, amino acids, vitamins, minerals, even fluids don't leave the blood and enter the tissue, and the waste from the tissue doesn't leave the tissue and enter the blood. So 3 things that they need to do. Absolutely start BPC 157, the gastric pentadecapeptide. I would take 2 oral capsules daily in the morning and 2 oral capsules daily in the evening. I would start to take micellized turmeric and curcumin, not just normal turmeric and curcumin pills. It has to be micellized. If you have them text me or email me, I'll tell them where they can get that.
They joined, by the way. They're here now.
Oh, okay, great. So you want them to take micellized turmeric and curcumin because we can't trust the lining of the blood vessel to transport this, right? When we nanoparticulize it, and then it can actually affect the inflammation. The third thing, if they want to do it very quickly, but it's an expensive option, is an exosome. There are ways to get exosome treatments. These will run you around $10,000 to $12,000, but they will shut the situation down almost immediately. And then the last one is to take that supplement that I just put into the chat there called endocalyx. That is phenomenal. What that endocalyx will do is repair the entire vascular lining that was damaged by COVID. You see, one of the things that happens in COVID and happens when we use synthetic mRNA vaccines is it runs and it hides and it exits into the endothelial lining of the blood vessel. And the immune system wages a low-grade war on this interior lining, causing inflammation and killing absorption of any nutrients. These people are chronically fatigued. Their mood is flattened. They have brain fog like you can't imagine. They get a great idea in the bedroom. They walk to the kitchen. They wonder what the heck they're doing in the kitchen. And this is all something called diffuse vasculitis, like systemic inflammation in the lining of the blood vessel. So those are the 3 things that will really shut that down quickly.
Follow up, is liposomal the same as micellized?
No, liposomal just means that they take a fat molecule and they actually put the compound inside of a liposome, which is a molecule, right? This has a dual phospholipid bilayer around the outside, and you have like a glutathione or something else inside of there. The reason why liposomal technology is great if you don't have absorption issues is that a lot of supplements, peptides, and other nutrients that we take orally are killed by the stomach acid. So a liposome kind of transports it through the stomach. Then when it exits the stomach, it gets hit with bile, right, from the gallbladder. Bile dissolves the liposome and releases that liposomal product, whether it's glutathione or vitamin C or what have you. So it's normally an excellent delivery system, right? Because you're getting through first pass metabolism, you're getting through the stomach acid. But for people with diffuse vasculitis, that's too large of a molecule for them to still absorb. Their best route of absorption is sublingually. They want to go right into the serum of the blood. So sublingual and injectables will have significantly more effect than orals. And this is super frustrating to long COVID patients because they're on a protocol that otherwise should work for what they're doing, but they're seeing virtually little, if any, physiologic effects, and the crushing fatigue, like mind-numbing. So when we use micellized turmeric and curcumin, BPC 157, exosomes and endocalyx, you see a complete reversal of that. In fact, there's a published clinical trial on endocalyx. You can read if you go to that link. You'll actually see the difference in imaging between the vasculitis when they started and vasculitis 4 months later. It looks like completely different humans.
And last question on this is, could the BPC actually exacerbate the mast cell flare-ups?
Usually BPC would not exacerbate a mast cell flare-up. So mast cell flare-ups are histamine related. You know, it's hypersensitivity to histamines. Mast cell flare-ups are also excellent for micellized turmeric and curcumin. So what happens in mast cell flare-ups is your body is already in a heightened inflamed state. Right. So let's say that, we measure inflammation from a 1 to a 4, and we call that mild, a 4 to a 7, and we call that moderate, a 7 to a 10, and we call that severe. So someone that is having mast cell flare-ups is walking around at a 6. So very minor insults cause massive histamine flare-ups. And so the one thing that you want to do is you want to lower the basal inflammation, the baseline level of inflammation. This is my issue with most allergy testing, because allergy testing does the same way, right? They grade the reaction of an allergen based on the level of histamine response. But allergy testing doesn't take into account your baseline sense of inflammation. So people that have high homocysteine, hyperhomocystinemia, they're walking around at a 6. So they eat a soybean, which only shows up as a 2, but on the test, it shows up as an 8. Does that make sense?
Well, so the real question is, does it make sense to Bo, who's here now?
Hey, Bo.
Can you hear?
Yeah, John. Hey, thanks for putting that question out there. Yeah, I appreciate that, Gary. It does make sense on the BPC.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And micellized turmeric and curcumin. There's 2 types: bioaloe and rice bran. And you want to take both of those, combine them in water, and take them 3 times a day, every 6 hours, and it will absolutely collapse of that histamine response, allow the body to heal.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Gary. We're going to move on. Another pivot here to carbs. All these transitions seem so abrupt to go from one subject to the next. I wish I was more masterful at creating a bridge, but the question is about eating carbs in the morning and reducing energy. Assuming right. Why is that?
Well, so first of all, when we talk about when we say energy, what do we really mean? Physiologically, what is energy? Well, everything that you perceive about energy is nothing more than oxygen in your blood. So if you told me Gary had a lot of energy today, physiologically, what you're saying is I had a lot of oxygen in my blood today. So if oxygen equals energy, which it does, then if I want to raise your energy level, I need to raise the amount of oxygen your blood transports, right? The reason why people that are the most exhausted sleep the worst is because these are both related to low levels of blood oxygen, right? If you are anemic or low on blood oxygen, you're tired. And then you go lay down to go to sleep, and your respiratory rate starts to decline, and you have a bloodstream that's already low on oxygen. As your respiratory rate starts to decline, your blood oxygen level drops. The brain sees this, it panics, and it wakes you up by pulsing cortisol. This is why people that are the most exhausted sleep the worst. So when we talk about carbohydrate intake, if I was actually to stand you in front of a thermograph and watch you eat different types of foods, fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and I was to watch the blood migration in the body. Where does the blood go? Because remember, what the blood's taking is the oxygen, right? And if you want to be awake and alert and focused and cognizant and thinking and sharp, you cannot have the blood from here be here. Remember, your intestinal tract is 30 feet long. It's enveloped with blood vessels. If you actually look at the scale of the amount of oxygen and the amount of blood that it takes to digest different foods, fats are at the very, very bottom. They take very little blood flow and they take very little oxygen. As you move up into the different types of proteins, you see that it takes slightly more blood and slightly more oxygen. As you climb what's called the glycemic index, the rate at which carbohydrate raises your blood sugar, right? High glycemic foods are things like sugars, rice, white flour, white bread, white pasta, white potatoes, fruits of all kinds that don't end in berry, versus low glycemic foods. You will see that it takes a fraction of the oxygen to digest fats and proteins than it does to digest carbohydrate. So if I divert, the amount of blood in the system is fixed. If you divert it from the brain and the limbs to the gut, your energy will follow. And I place an enormously high priority on my energy level. So like when I look at foods, I look at food, is that going to steal from me, or is it going to serve me? If it's not going to serve me, I don't let it in, no matter how beautifully it's dressed. Right. And that's why, desserts are dressed in some really pretty suits. But I just don't let thieves into my temple. So when we're thinking about energy as our priority versus taste, and then if we have proteins and carbohydrates before 2, and we have our carbohydrates later in the afternoon, this is not only better for weight loss, it is substantially better for energy, right? Because you're not diverting oxygen and blood to the gut.
Don't let thieves into the temple. Bonus time.
That just rolled out too.
Gary, I
kind of like that one too. I might write that down.
Yeah, please do. When a guy gets enough value out of a meeting, out of a live or in person or online event, they write bonus time, and then they have their share, and then it's like, I could go home right now and feel like I got everything I came for. And so that was a bonus time moment for me, buddy. Thank you.
That's awesome. Can't the thief come in once a week?
That's right. Okay. Another pivot here into weight loss. So, there's a lot of directions that we can take this question, but I think the group was just voting in general on, can you make a few comments about the 1 or 2 things that you might recommend first, the lead dominoes in terms of weight loss for an individual?
Yeah. So let's just talk about the science behind weight loss, because it's not out this online, because there are laws to the way that the body prioritizes energy. And these are as valid as the law of gravity. There are no exceptions to these rules, right? And what happens when people want to lose weight, usually when they say, I want to lose weight, what they really mean is, I want to lose fat. And what happens is, most people's goal is to lose fat, and then they exercise to be cardiovascularly conditioned. So, and these two don't go to the same parties, right? They don't even like each other. So when we talk about the priorities of energy, right? If you want to write these down, like I say, there's no exception to these rules. The first is that if you have glucose in your bloodstream, your body will always go to glucose as a source of energy first. You have no choice over this, right? This is a physiologic law. So if you have sugar in the blood, your body will always burn the sugar out of the blood first. So now, what if you don't have any sugar in the blood? You have a backup, a reserve of energy called glycogen. We store glycogen in the muscles, which is never contributed back to the bloodstream. And then we store glycogen in the liver. This is a stored form of sugar. And what happens is the liver turns this into sugar. It's called gluconeogenesis. It takes glycogen and it throws it back into the bloodstream. You have about a 20-minute reserve of glycogen if you're exercising. Now, the question is, once you have no glucose and you have no glycogen, now what? Well, now there's a fork in the road. And we would love to think that the body automatically goes to fat, right? But it has 2 choices. It can either burn fat for energy, or it can burn lean muscle. It takes 5 to 6 hours to go down the fatty acid pathway and turn fatty acids into energy. It takes 3 minutes to turn lean muscle into energy. So if you are exercising intensely in a fasted state, there is a 100% chance that you are burning lean muscle. I'll say that again. If you are exercising intensely in a fasted state, there is a 100% chance that you are burning lean muscle. In fact, it happens all the time. I have patients come in to see me and they're like, Gary, I don't get it. Seems to happen more with women than men, but men too. And they'll say, look, I wake up in the morning fasted. I drink a cup of black coffee. I go to Orange Theory. I go hammer down for 55 minutes. I've been doing that 5 days a week for 3 months, and I haven't lost a single pound. Like, what's going on? I'm not even eating. And I go, well, you're not eating, but your body is. It's just eating you. And so so now that we know that, right? Actually, fat is burned at low intensities and at rest. It's a really hard concept for us to get our arms around, that fat is burned during low intensity exercise and at rest. Why is fat burned at rest? Because when the liver restores its glycolic reserve, when it puts glycogen back into the liver, it can do it from sugar or from fat. So you wanted to do it from fat. The second is, if you put the body under an intense demand for energy, it will go to the most available energy source. You know, I used to be a semi-competitive triathlete. 2010, I was the age group champion for the state of Florida. And all of the guys that I raced with, triathlon, all of the guys I raced with, without a single exception, we were all skinny fat, right? I mean, we could all lay down a half a marathon, no problem. We could go on a century bike ride, we could swim 2 miles, but we were skinny fat. Some of us looked sick, to be honest with you. I mean, I would have fraternity brothers of mine come down to see me that hadn't seen me in like 3-4 years. And they're like, dude, are you okay? I mean, did you give up eating? I'm like, I'm a beast. I just did a 40-mile bike ride. But we spent more time burning our own lean muscle than we did ever touching our fat reserve, right? Distance athletes have very high percentages of body fat. So what if we want to burn fat? Tim Ferriss wrote an entire book on this called The 4-Hour Body. He used a concept called 30-30-30, 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking, followed by 30 minutes of steady state cardiovascular exercise. Now, by protein, my favorite source of protein is something called, it's an amino acid blend. It's called Perfect Aminos. It's by Dr. Minkoff. It is the only amino acid supplement in the world that is 99%. So if you want to burn fat, you wake up in the morning, you have a cup of black coffee, and you take amino acids. Now, when you exercise, when your liver does a check, no glucose, no glycogen, no more glucose in the blood, it will do a check for amino acids. If it sees amino acids, it will not switch to lean muscle metabolism. It will burn the amino acids in the blood. So if you take perfect aminos, which don't break a fast, which are 99% bioavailable, and been taken in the morning in a fasted state, and you do steady state cardiovascular exercise and get in cold water, you'll be shocked how fast this fat strips off your body. I mean,
Gary, you just said perfect aminos created by who? You mentioned it.
Dr. Minkoff, Minkoff. Here, I'll put him into the.
And then you said it's 99%, and then I think you cut out for a quick second.
The only amino acid blend in the world that's anyways, that has any published clinical research. Remember, I don't read like
right
just articles online. I only read published peer-reviewed clinical research. So it's the only one with published peer-reviewed clinical research studies, which are right here on his site.
Is that part of your routine in the morning? Do you do these first thing?
What, read research?
No, sorry, the perfect aminos.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and read research.
But I also read research. Yeah. So there it is. That's the one. Yeah, it's called Perfect Aminos.
Cool.
So if you give the body what it needs to do its job, it won't eat itself.
Yeah.
Remember, as sophisticated as we like to think the brain is, it's really not. The brain is very primal, right? You know what the brain cares about? The brain cares about survival. And it's nasty. The brain is like the little Kim Jong-un of dictators sitting up here, right? It takes everything for itself, right? If it wants calcium, it'll leach it from the bones. If it wants amino acids, it'll strip it from lean muscle tissue. If it wants sugar, it'll activate the RF1A2 receptor on the back of the tongue and give you a dopamine reward for giving it sugar. That's why most people don't like sugar. They're addicted to sugar, right? So because the brain's like, hey, I'll give you some dopamine. I'll give you a nice little drug high if you give me some of that sugar. And you go, well, let me get you some sugar.
Yeah.
Right. That's why it's right up there with nicotine and alcohol and other really addictive compounds.
Gary, anything else on, you mentioned that in priority order, this glucose concept is number one.
Glucose, glycogen, and then there's a fork, lean muscle or fat.
Okay,
right?
got it.
Fatty acid pathway. So we don't want it to go to the lean muscle pathway. And
yes.
So, even if you look at bodybuilders and how like they prepare for competition, you'll see that they do long duration, steady state cardiovascular exercise, right? Yeah. not intense cardiovascular exercise. Again, I'm talking about if your goal is to burn fat, which is what you asked me about, right? The difference between burning fat and becoming cardiovascularly conditioned is when you want to become cardiovascularly conditioned, you want high levels of lactic acid, right? You want high heart rate cardio, because high levels of lactic acid, when they come in contact with the ends of capillaries, will cause capillaries to sprout. This is called angiogenesis, new blood vessel growth. The more capillaries you have, the more circulation you have, the faster you exchange oxygen from the lung to the tissue and carbon dioxide from the tissue to the lung. And this is what determines whether or not I'm more cardiovascularly conditioned than you. I have a higher what's called VO2 max. So the faster we can exchange those gases, the more cardiovascularly conditioned we are. But most people exercise to be cardiovascularly conditioned, but their goal is to burn fat, right? So if you are fasted, you need to do steady state cardiovascular exercise or weight training. Weight bearing exercise beats cardiovascular exercise, hands down, full stop, in every peer reviewed strength and conditioning study ever published by any kind of notable source. You know, it's astounding to me that people don't think you can get cardiovascular exercise by picking up weights, but you're just not, in my opinion, picking up weights the right way. So if you only had 30 or 40 minutes, weight bearing exercise, weight training exercise will beat cardiovascular exercise hands down for both fat metabolism and for lean muscle gains. Remember, you know, muscle is our metabolic currency, right? It's an organ, right? It eliminates waste. It repairs the body, it detoxifies the body, it moves lymphatic fluid around the body. One of the hallmarks of aging is muscle mass, right? Sarcopenia, age-related muscle wasting. So if you want to live a long time, you know, lift heavy weight, safely lift heavy weight.
Yeah, it's good stuff, Gary. Here's the last one I'm going to ask from the ones that were voted up.
Yeah.
And then again, Gary, I'm also going to just, I'm going to keep peppering you with questions until you click leave meeting.
Well, I mean,
guys will know when Gary's done, when he just disappears off the screen. But here's the last question that was upvoted, and then we can let the guys ask if you have time. We'll see. Human connectivity is the theme of this one, right? How do you view this topic as it relates to overall health? So touch, I would even throw massage in there, working out with friends, coffee chats. This is just examples the guys were using, but you know, the human connectivity piece.
Yeah, you know, so when you really need, when you say human connectivity, right? Again, I convert everything to science, right? So if you convert human connectivity to physiology, what you're really talking about is human frequency, right? We know now that frequency is a very valid, the universal law of attraction is a very valid law. It's as law, again, it's as valid as the law of physics. There is a law in physics. You're welcome to look it up. It's called constructive interference. What constructive interference says is that if two frequencies of equal wavelength meet, the size of the frequency doubles. The opposite law, destructive interference, says that if two frequencies of opposite wavelength meet, the frequency cancels out. So I'm actually filming a documentary series right now with Dr. Joe Dispenza and Dr. Bruce Lipton, if you know those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Work on mindset and meditation. So we know, for example, now in the largest clinical study ever done on aging, that the single most important variable in older centenarians was happiness, was how content they were with their life. And it actually outpaced alcohol consumption, smoking, exercise, and diet. Now, it's astounding and it flies in the face of a lot of other modern studies, but the largest study ever done on longevity, isolated, and again, I'm happy to send it to you if you want me to. When we get off of here, I'll dig it up and I'll put it in the chat, or I'll send it to you. Was the, you know, how content these people were over a lifetime. Broken heart syndrome, you know, where one spouse that's been married to another spouse for 40, 50, 60 years, and one spouse dies, very shortly thereafter, the other spouse dies. And this is, they're dying of the change of frequency in their body. We know in repeatable clinical studies that some of the strongest placebo trials ever done, where you took two patients afflicted with the exact same condition, and when you sat them down You told one patient that they were the luckiest person on earth because they qualified for a clinical trial that had 100% efficacy in curing the disease that they were faced with. And you gave them a placebo pill with a stage 3 or stage 4 cancer. And you gave the exact same patient, or, you know, a patient with the exact same profile, a chemotherapeutic, radiological treatments with very little efficacy, but you told them that the 3-year survival rate was less than 5%. They were terminally ill. They would likely be discharged to hospice for palliative care. And you can actually see the frequency in every cell in the body change. We are starting to understand now that things like prayer and connectivity and content and frequency matter. Frequency that leaves your body and the frequency that you allow to enter your body. One of my favorite clinical studies ever done is called the Spain scale of emotion. It's the scale of positive and negative emotion. Essentially what they did was they put human beings in something called a Faraday's cage for a short period of time. This is an area that is completely devoid of any frequency, no microwave, radio wave, no 5G, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. And they were actually able to measure the frequency leaving a human being's body. They were able to measure it with such accuracy that a practitioner on a different floor and a different, different building could tell exactly what emotional state that person was in. Meaning they could isolate the difference between passion, elation, joy, and arousal, the difference between anger, despair, resentment, and forgiveness. They could literally isolate these frequencies. They found that the most powerful frequency to leave a human being's body was the frequency of authenticity. And this frequency that they called authenticity only happened when 2 conditions were met. The person's words were truthful and they believed what they were saying. And so when we surround ourselves with other high vibration beings, people that we love and people that love us, people who are in alignment. And when I say in alignment, they have similar goals and similar values, similar sense of humor, similar interests. We actually derive energy from those people. Quantum mechanics would tell you that you can get energy from other human beings. It's a physiological fact. You can also lose energy to other human beings. Toxic work environments, toxic news, toxic information. You know how we say that the brain, we only use 10% of our brains. That's because the other 90% of our brain is in touch with 32 trillion cells every second. It is in touch with 32 trillion cells. There's actually not enough computing power in all of the iPhones in North America to match the brain's communication frequency with 32 trillion cells in a single minute. So this thing is the power that this and the power that this has over the environment around it. It's just that we've learned not to pay attention to it. So human interaction, prayer, community, common interest, humor, exercise with friends, community is extraordinarily important to longevity. You know, some of the worst clinical studies ever done are when they take cells or organs and things out of human beings and they study them in isolation. Because in isolation, we don't behave the same way that we do in communities, right? You want to accelerate somebody's death, put a human being in complete isolation. Right? You want to accelerate an animal's death, put it in complete isolation. Do the same with fish, take it out of the school, and put it in complete isolation. So, and this is true with cells in the human body. Cells exist in communities. They communicate through frequency, through exosomes, through the plasma environment that they're in. They're very sensitive to frequency. When we take cells and we put them in a lab and we study them in isolation, they don't behave like they do in their own community. So I think it's massively important, and we're really starting to have the science now to prove it. The documentary we're going to put out is called The Frequency of Truth. It'll actually blow the minds off of all of the pundits that don't believe in prayer and community and the universal law of attraction, the capacity of the brain's, ability to heal the body.
Yeah, I've got another member question here that I want to throw to you, but to complete this, I want to ask you as well about how do you view speaking to your beliefs, your findings that might fly in the face of mainstream thoughts and ideas? Like, how do you deal with the elements of where you're getting pushback, you're saying controversial things, perhaps? How do you balance the courage to speak your truth? Or how do you find the courage to speak your truth? Maybe that's a sloppy question, but I think you know what I'm asking.
Yeah. I think what happens is when we start to border on espousing our own opinion in terms of, this is from my perspective, this is where we get into trouble. So rarely when I speak are things that I'm saying my opinion. I can cite a peer-reviewed published clinical trial. When I say follow the science, I actually truly follow the science. I love science. I read physics journals and peer-reviewed journals for sport. I don't have a side gig. It's what I would do as I was on vacation. It's what I'm going to do tonight before I go to bed. It's what I do in the mornings when I wake up. So I have almost a compulsive obsession with just wanting to know, like an intellectual curiosity that like sort of drives me in a way that I can't even describe. And so I like to cite resources and I like to cite fact patterns. And sometimes those fly in the face of what people are saying. And during COVID, I got absolutely slaughtered. I got called a Trump sycophant. I actually had to look that word up. I didn't know what a sycophant was. Turns out it's like somebody that blindly follows somebody else, misogynistic. I was like, I love massages. I had to look up half of the insults. Yeah, my Instagram account deleted because I told people to take D3 and vitamin C, and lo and behold, the second leading cause of morbidity in COVID was clinical deficiency in vitamin D3. I wasn't even selling vitamin D3. I just said, hey, don't sit around on your couch and wait until you can't breathe and go to the ER. That's the kiss of death. Fight by actually giving your body the weapons that the immune system needs to do its job. And a couple of the big ones are vitamin D3, resveratrol, vitamin C. And I didn't even put a link to my own supplements. I just put it out there. If you go to my Instagram, they're covered by fact checkers. And interestingly, some of the links that are on there are links to the CDC's website, and then I get fact checked by the CDC for having false information, and it's a link back to their website. So it's pretty mind-numbing that when that happened. But I spent 22 years of my life predicting when people were going to die, and for that entire 22 years, I bought into the false notion that it was just data. That these were not, there wasn't human beings on the other side of those spreadsheets. And I had a very specific case because I wasn't allowed to have any contact with the treating physician or with the patient. And I had a very specific case of a woman in the Midwest who was transferring to her summer home or to her winter home in Miami, and she was transferring care between cardiologists. And I saw in her record that the cardiologist in Miami had written a contraindicated script to what she was taking in the Midwest. Now, normally the MIB would pick this up, but it didn't pick it up. And I knew that when she landed, that she was actually going to have a stroke. She was going to have a thrombolytic event. And when I went into my human resource director's office that day, and I told her that I was going to contact that patient, they threatened me with prosecution. And I don't tell the story very often, as you can tell, because it makes me very emotional. But that was the day that I resigned. And from that day forward, I said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life, helping people live healthier, happier, longer lives. So it doesn't bother me about the heat that I get, because I know what my purpose is. Sorry, dude. I guess I'm thinking about that woman a lot. I wish I'd picked up the phone and called her.
Guys, I just want to take a second. I don't want to rush past this moment. And I just want to ask if you guys could, everybody who's here, just, I don't know, put your hand on your heart, give Gary some love, some appreciation, and just maybe acknowledge him in your own way for what he just shared. That's it, man. I just want to let you know, I see you, Gary, and I really appreciate you telling me that, telling all of us that. Yeah. Thank you.
So that's where I get so much, energy to do this. I think that's why I'm so driven, because I've got a big hole to fill. And those insurance companies, they're the devil, man. I mean, we could have saved so many lives. We could have helped so many people, but instead we use that information to price financial services products against people. And they they threaten me with prosecution, criminal prosecution, if I contact the patient.
Yeah.
Even though it saved their life.
Gary, quick check in here. Just feels like a good moment to see how you're doing on time.
So I've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Until about 5-10.
All right, great. Let me throw you another one from a guy who's here live. Broke his back when he was 17, broke it again at 26. A lot of inflammation, living on a scale of pain 6 to 9. There's other parts here that are written in, but just to get right to it, he's been very active, chiropractic, massage, workouts, energy medicine, all of that stuff. Thoughts on reducing pain?
Yeah. So again, 3 things that you can do is number one, the BPC 157 taken systemically. The second would be micellized turmeric and curcumin, because that will penetrate tissues that otherwise are not being penetrated. The third is non-weight bearing stretching. So there's a stretch called a sink stretch, where you walk up to the edge of a sink. You put your hands over the edge of the sink. You have 2 feet on the ground, 2 hands over the edge of the sink. You lean backwards and you let your sacrum sink all the way to the ground and turn it like you're turning it into the back of your ankles. Then when you stand up, you pull with your arms so that you traction the spine and don't stack the spine. It's a great way to wake up in the morning. It's the safest stretch that you can do because you have 4 points of contact. Tractioning the spine is much different than stacking the spine. Tractioning the spine tricks the brain into thinking that you're weightless, and it floods that area with synovial fluid. The other thing that I would really consider is multi-level stem cell injection and exosome IV infusions. There's a couple of places in the world that do these better than anyone else. There's a place called Bioaccelerator in Medellin, Colombia, where all the UFC fighters go. There's another clinic in Cabo. I'm actually going down there this weekend on Sunday to talk about acquiring that for 10x Health. But stem cells and exosomes are very special biologics, because a stem cell derived from the umbilical cord, what's called a mesenchymal stem cell, is a cell that has left the mother and it's never made it to the fetus. So this is a cell that's never been given a command. These cells are capable of differentiating into any tissue in the body: collagen, fibrin, elastin, bone, cartilage, cartilaginous friction surfaces, what's called the nucleus pulposus, which is in the center of all of those vertebrae that were injured when you broke your spine. And we can not only restore normopathic function, but we can reverse pathophysiology with stem cells. And the same with exosomes. Remember that traditional things like traditional corticosteroids, traditional cortisones, traditional anti-inflammatories don't work, because again, where we have long-term systemic inflammation, we have very compromised blood flow. So it's very hard to get anti-inflammatory factors. This is why this kind of pain tends to be chronic. The other thing that I would suggest that you purchase is a PEMF mat. That is an absolute must. Pulse electromagnetic field mat. If you want to know which mat, you can email me or hit me on Instagram. I'll have my assistant send you the link to it. Pulse electromagnetic field is phenomenal for pain, because what PEMF does is it runs a low Gauss current through the body. And when you run low Gauss current through the body, you basically make every cell, all 32 trillion cells in the body, alkaline in about 16 minutes. After they become alkaline, you hyper-excite the microvascular circulation, all the tiny little capillaries that go in and around the spine, all those IVS, those intervertebral foramens, all those discal spaces, all of that it has compromised blood flow. PEMF opens those channels. The other thing that it does is it decreases inflammation. So it makes you alkaline, it increases circulation, it decreases inflammation, and you can actually sleep on these mats. I have one right in my bed. It looks like a yoga mat. You put it right under the mattress pad. So you have your mattress, and then you put this PEMF mat, put the mattress pad over it, put the sheet over top of that, and then turn it on for 30 minutes when you go to sleep, and turn it on for 30 minutes before you wake up. Absolute game changer. If you want to read some mind-numbing stories, Google PEMF and back pain, and you will think these articles are written just for you. People that are on a very similar journey for you to get out of pain, including my fiance who had an L5-S1 fusion. It's been an absolute life changer.
This is awesome. Thank you so much, Gary. Truly appreciate it. I think you know my brother, by the way. He works the cardones too. So awesome.
Oh, he does?
Yeah,
Awesome.
he's the shooting guy.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I do know him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time here with the firm.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
I think we got time for one last question. Is that right, Gary?
Sure.
One last question. Tony, do you want to read this? Because I want to make sure that I honor this. And I want to read this properly. Are you, Tony D, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you ask your question directly?
Yeah. Hey, Gary. Yeah, it's just a question about lymphedema that I was diagnosed with towards the end of last year. It was after aortic valve replacement surgery, which was about a year ago, back in March of last year. It started with swelling of the feet, and it got the ankles, and then the whole legs, and then so going through this lymphedema therapy now. I've been doing it for the last month and a half or so, and just seeing if there's anything you would suggest as far as like type of diet, types of food or supplements that would help with this, since there's no cure for lymphedema. Just trying to see some things along those lines.
I mean, lymphatic drainage is actually excellent for lymphedema. I'll show you the one that I use is a it's called a Balancer Pro. So Balancer Pro is I have a room in my house called the superhuman room. We're going to go back there now. Basically my whole place is a giant biohacking lab, but
Wow.
So this is the that's the PEMF mat that I was talking to you about. So it's pulse electromagnetic field mat. That's a red light therapy that in there. This is Hypermax oxygen. That's 95% O2. I breathe that every day for 10 minutes. But this is, let me show you what this Balancer Pro looks like. It looks like a moon suit. You see this Balancer Pro? This is the best lymphatic drainage system in the world. When you put these on, when you actually put this suit on, it's a full suit that when you put it on, it'll go all the way to your wrists and all the way down to your ankles. And what it has sensors in it, so when it senses backflow, it will cut that area of backflow off and then move the lymphatic fluid back towards the trunk so you can evacuate all of that waste. It's phenomenal. Normatec also makes a set of compression gear. I would consider that consumer grade. It's a little less expensive, but the Balancer Pro is, for someone that's chronic lymphedema, it's worth the investment in that to get the proper level of like clinical lymphatic.
Okay, is that something, because I just got fitted for these custom compression garments, is that something you do while wearing those garments, that sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, and I would with lymphedema too, the whole idea is not to have fluid pull, right? It's the pulling of the fluid that's the issue. It's not actually the swelling, it's the pulling of the fluid, because when you pull fluid, you can get things like DVTs, deep vein thromboses, and then pulled fluid has a tendency to collect anaerobic bacteria, right? So these are the bacteria and the viruses that thrive in environments that are cold and dark and moist and oxygen deprived. So warm, dark, moist, and oxygen deprived. And so by draining the lymphatic fluid on a regular basis, you not only feel better, but now you open up all that space for waste to go back into the lymph system and get evacuated. Also, by strength training, which I know is difficult when you have chronic lymphedema, but strength training, because muscular contraction is what actually circulates lymphatic fluid. The lymphatic system is a static system. It doesn't have any pressure behind it like an artery or a vein, right? So it doesn't return like venous flow does to the heart. It's very static. So if we can actually strength train, especially our extremities, we can reduce the long-term physiologic impact of lymphedema. Hold on one second. My assistant's getting ready to leave.
Tony, thanks for asking the question, man. And guys, for the rest of everybody that's here, it's like this is incredibly powerful just to be witness to it. to have resources, ideas, suggestions. Like, I'm thrilled. Gary, I was just talking about how happy I am for the guys and for everybody that's going to benefit from this. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Me too. I mean, this makes me happy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of happy people here. Gary, I'm looking at the clock. I want to be respectful. I want to say thank you.
I got 3 minutes left. If you want to just stick in one more, I got till 6:10.
Oh, wow, man. All right. Well, let's see. Guys, does anybody have a question they want to throw out that could be a short answer?
John Ainsworth. John Ainsworth has one in the chat.
Yeah, John.
Yeah,
John's got
John's
a
question.
Go, John. Can you ask it?
Thank you. Yes, I will. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I've got a 11-year-old daughter that's about 18 months into a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. And I don't know, anyone that has come across this, it's a pretty encapsulating disease. Carb counts and insulin doses with every carb that goes into her body have to be thought through by her mom and I. And if there's a possibility of somehow eradicating this, is obviously a far stretch, but making this a simpler thing to handle would be pretty amazing.
Not a far stretch at all. I'm actually putting into the chat some recent published clinical research on reversal of type 1 diabetes. I'm going to also give you the Harvard study that was actually just published. You know, the big issue is, and I think I spoke about this before, is that, you know, if her pancreas ever worked, and you said she's 11 years old and she's 18 months into the diagnosis. So this means that her pancreas worked for the majority of her lifetime, right? So this means that the pancreas is dormant. It's not necrotic. It hasn't died. You know, because by virtue of the fact that it's still in her body, it means it's non-necrotic, right? The dead tissue we have to take out of the body. You can't leave dead tissue in the body. So the pancreas has gone dormant. Normally what happens here is a progressive degradation. I like the information is trying to get out. I talk over myself. Is a progressive degradation in the beta cells of the pancreas, called the islets that manufacture insulin. And we have shown repeatedly that we can reawaken these islet cells, these beta cells in the pancreas, so that they begin to produce insulin again on their own with something called amniotic stem cell IV treatments. I sent you a link here to one of the articles. If you click on that, you'll see stem cells in the search for the type 1 diabetes cure. These are using mesenchymal stem cells. And the second one is a new therapy for treating type 1 diabetes. And this was done by the Harvard Stem Cell Institute. You know, maybe offline, you could send me a DM on Instagram and I'll give you some guidance on that. But I have seen with my own eyes, and I am aware of hundreds of other patients that have been type 1 diabetics that actually no longer have diabetes and have fully functioning pancreas. So, you know, in the meantime, obviously you need insulin support, right? But not to chronically be dependent on insulin, especially because she's prepubescent, which means that the neuroplasticity of her brain hasn't finished forming. She's got a decade of growth and cellular turnover in her life to look forward to. And, you know, there's a general saying that so goes puberty, so goes the adult, right? Like the largest obesity study ever conducted looked at obese children and obese adults. If you don't get a hold of a child before puberty, the chances of reducing obesity as adults goes down precipitously. So she's prepubescent. She's in a category that would really, really respond well to these types of therapies.
I don't even know how to say thank you enough. I really appreciate it. I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Awesome, man. You got it, brother. Thank
Gary,
you, guys.
Gary, thank you, man. I'm just going to say this for the guys. We appreciate you. We love you. And we really respect the work that you're doing. And this means a lot that you would spend time with us today. So hat tip to you and to your entire team that's behind your mission. And it's really wonderful what you're doing, brother.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you guys. Incredible. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, thank you guys too.
Guys,
I appreciate you guys giving me your time today.
Throw some quick comments in the chat box so Gary can feel that. And since frequency matters, if you guys can all unmute yourself and give Gary a round of applause in whatever way you want to love him.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, brother.
Let him hear it.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you so much.
You guys, man, this was awesome.
Awesome.
Appreciate
So great.
you so much. We'll do it again. All right.
Peace, brother.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Gentlemen, for the rest, there we go. What I wanted to say to you guys is that, you know, when you leave this call, couple thoughts. One, remember that we're going to put this in the vault for you guys with all the resources. So if you link to something, if you suggested something, we'll put all that there. That will be for just you guys. But we also wanted to share this with on the podcast so everybody can benefit from this. We don't want to sit on this one. We want other people to benefit. If there was any moment where your name was said and you don't want that to be aired on the podcast for whatever reason, but we can bleep your name, just let us know. I don't think anything was like that you wouldn't want to be shared, but we're going to share this with the world. And we want guys, other people, you know, people with children who they could be helped, or people with your situations that you've asked about to be helped. And we want to help spread the word for Gary. The other thing I wanted to say is that, you know, these items that he's recommending are not inexpensive items. I mean, you know, even this Balancer Pro that he, you know, some of these things these could be $20,000 items, $40,000 items. And yeah, you know, when I think about what a family man with a business can do is when you have a thriving business and you have a profitable business, and that is where being financially stable serves you and your family, as you can invest in these resources that might save your life or the lives of other people. So I also wanted to give a nod to continuing to thrive in your business, continuing to be profitable in your lives so that you can afford to do these things that will take care of you and your families. And I just wanted to encourage you. I wanted to root you on. I wanted to tell you that I'm in your corner. And you know, I love that you guys showed up today. I love all of you for being here and being part of this mission. And this makes me feel really good. I feel like we did good work today, guys. It's wonderful that we're now connecting to Gary and that we've got, you know, he's on our team. What a guy to have on our team, you know? It's really cool. With that said, fellas, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, John.
Sending y'all lots of love.
Cool.
Thanks, Johnny.
Peace.
Yeah. Bye.